There is a moment in every person's life that almost nobody sees. No applause, no audience, no spotlight. Just you standing in front of a mirror, looking at the person staring back at you, and asking a question that changes everything. If I keep living exactly like this, where will I be 5 years from now? Think about that for a moment. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, not next New Year's Day when everyone suddenly decides they're going to become a different person 5 years, because life doesn't become extraordinary in one dramatic afternoon. It becomes extraordinary one ordinary day at a time, or it quietly slips away one ordinary excuse at a time. Let me tell you something. Excuses are strange things. They don't feel dangerous. They feel comfortable. They feel reasonable. They even sound intelligent. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. I'll start when life calms down. I need more money first. I don't have enough experience. I'm too young. I'm too old. I've failed before. They had advantages I never had. Listen carefully. Every excuse has one job, not to protect your future, to protect your comfort. And comfort is a beautiful prison. The walls are soft, the bed is warm, the food is enough to survive, but the door is locked from the inside. Nobody forced you into that prison. You decorated it. You gave every excuse a comfortable chair. You invited procrastination to stay for dinner. You told fear it could sleep in the guest room. Then one day you woke up and wondered why your dreams moved out. Here's what most people don't understand. Your life is not built by the biggest decisions. It is built by the smallest permissions. Every time you permit yourself to quit, you train your character. Every time you permit yourself to delay, you train your identity. Every time you say, not today, your future quietly hears, maybe never. I learned something years ago. There was an old craftsman in a small town. Nothing about him looked extraordinary. His workshop wasn't famous. His clothes were simple. His tools were old. But people traveled from miles away just to watch him work. Not because he worked fast. Because he worked with unbelievable consistency. One day a young man asked him, "How did you become so skilled?" The old man smiled without looking up. He said, "I stopped negotiating with myself." The young man looked confused. The old man continued carving a piece of wood. "When I was young, every morning my mind gave me a choice. Sleep a little longer, start tomorrow, take the easy road, and every time I argued with my own discipline, I became weaker. So one day, I made a decision. I would no longer ask myself if I felt like working. I would simply begin." That sentence stayed with me for years. He didn't become great because he was talented. He became great because he removed the daily debate. How much energy do people waste every single day arguing with themselves? I should exercise, but I'm tired. I should study, but maybe later. I should apologize, but what if they reject me? I should build the business, but what if it fails? Every conversation inside your head costs energy, and eventually you're exhausted, not because life is difficult, but because indecision is exhausting. Imagine driving a car with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. The engine screams, the fuel disappears. The car barely moves. That is how millions of people live. They want success, but they feed excuses. They want confidence, but they rehearse fear. They want change, but they worship comfort. Here's what most people don't understand. Confidence does not come before action. Confidence follows evidence. The first time you lift a heavy weight, you're nervous. The 100th time, you don't think about it. The first time you speak in front of strangers, your hands shake. The 50th time, you're focused on helping people instead of protecting yourself. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief creates identity. Identity creates destiny. But somewhere along the way, people reversed the process. They said, once I believe in myself, then I'll act. No, you act. Then belief quietly arrives and says, I guess this is who we are now. Think about a tiny seed. When you hold it in your hand, it doesn't look impressive. No branches, no fruit, no shade, no strength. If someone judged the seed only by its appearance, they would throw it away. But the seed never argues. It never says, I'll grow once people believe in me. It simply goes underground in darkness, in pressure, in silence, where nobody applauds, where nobody notices. And one day, the earth itself cannot contain what has been quietly developing underneath. Your discipline is like that. Nobody claps because you woke up early. Nobody gives you a trophy because you kept your promise. Nobody interviews you because you read 10 pages today. But roots are growing. Character is growing. Standards are growing. And one day people will call it overnight success. Overnight success is usually 10 years wearing invisible clothes. Let me tell you another story. There were two brothers. They grew up in the same neighborhood, same schools, same parents, same struggles, same financial problems. One brother became known for one sentence. I'll try. The other became known for another sentence. I'll find a way. At first, those sentences sounded almost identical. Years later, they look nothing alike because I'll try leaves room for escape. I'll find a way closes the exit. One sentence searches for reasons. The other searches for solutions. Language matters. Pay attention to the conversations you have with yourself. I have to. Or I get to. I can't. Or I haven't learned how yet. This is impossible. Or this is difficult. Words become beliefs. Beliefs become habits. Habits become lives. Here's something fascinating. When rain falls, it falls on every roof. The difference isn't the rain. The difference is the roof. Some roofs leak. Some roofs collect water. Life brings storms to everyone. But preparation determines whether the storm destroys you or strengthens you. People often ask why some individuals stay calm under pressure. Because pressure didn't introduce them to discipline. Pressure revealed it. The firefighter doesn't become brave during the fire. The athlete doesn't become disciplined during the championship. The surgeon doesn't suddenly become skilled during the operation. What happens under pressure depends entirely on what happened before pressure arrived. That is why excuses are so expensive, because they don't charge you immediately. They send the bill later. Skip one workout. Nothing happens to skip 1 week. Still manageable. Skip 1 year. Now climbing stairs feels difficult. Miss one opportunity. Nothing changes. Miss opportunities for years. Now you wonder why life feels stuck. The compound effect works whether you're paying attention or not. Every decision is planting something. Every habit is voting for a future. Every excuse is signing a contract with tomorrow. Imagine carrying a backpack. The first excuse weighs almost nothing. Then another, then another. Years later, people say, life is so heavy. No, the excuses became heavy. Not life. Life gave you opportunities. Excuses collected stones. I remember hearing about a teacher who walked into a classroom carrying 2 glasses of water. One was crystal clear. The other looked dirty. He asked the students which one they would drink. Everyone pointed to the clean glass. Then he smiled. He poured 1 tiny drop of ink into the clean water every day. Just 1 drop. At first, nobody noticed. Eventually, the water became completely dark. He said something unforgettable. Your character changes exactly like this. Not through giant disasters, through tiny daily compromises. Nobody wakes up with terrible habits overnight. Nobody wakes up extraordinary overnight. Everything compounds. Think about that. The person you become next year is already being quietly assembled today. Not on vacation, not during motivation. Today, this ordinary day, this average Tuesday. This quiet afternoon when nobody is watching, that is where greatness hides. Not in the spotlight, in repetition. Here's what most people don't understand. Motivation is wonderful. But discipline is trustworthy. Motivation says, I feel inspired. Discipline says, I gave my word. Which one do you think survives bad weather? A feeling or a promise? There was a woman who wanted to learn a new language. She bought expensive courses, downloaded apps, watched videos, talked about her dream constantly. Another woman simply studied 20 minutes every morning. 1 year later, people called the second woman talented. Talent had very little to do with it. Consistency disguised itself so well, people mistook it for talent. How often do we admire results while ignoring routines? We see the harvest. We never see the mornings. We applaud the victory. We ignore the lonely evenings. We admire confidence. We overlook the uncomfortable conversations that built it. Everything valuable grows quietly. Noise belongs to shortcuts. Growth belongs to patience. Let me ask you something. What excuse has been living in your house the longest? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's comparison. Maybe it's perfectionism. Perfectionism, one of the most respectable excuses ever invented. People say, I'm waiting until everything is perfect. Really? Perfect according to whom? Perfection keeps millions of dreams permanently under construction. Nothing gets finished. Nothing gets shared. Nothing gets tested. Nothing improves. Imagine a musician refusing to play until every note is perfect. Imagine a child refusing to walk until they can never fall. Progress has always looked awkward in the beginning. The first draft is messy. The first business is clumsy. The first speech feels uncomfortable. The first workout hurts. The first investment feels risky. The first step always introduces you to the second. You cannot skip beginnings. And somewhere along that path, something extraordinary starts happening that almost nobody notices at first. The person who once needed motivation every morning slowly becomes the kind of person who simply keeps their promises. Not because every day feels exciting, not because every obstacle disappears, but because they begin to understand a truth that changes everything. Your future is quietly listening to every decision you make today. Every alarm you snooze, every promise you keep, every book you read, every difficult conversation you stop avoiding, every hour you spend learning instead of complaining. And here's where it becomes even more interesting. Because once you stop making excuses for the small things, you begin to notice something unexpected about the bigger challenges. They don't seem as impossible anymore. Think about this for a moment. Hey, have you ever watched someone carry a heavy piece of furniture? At first they struggle. Every step looks difficult. Their muscles shake. Their breathing changes. Then something remarkable happens. Their body adjusts. Not because the furniture became lighter, but because they became stronger. Life works the same way. People spend years praying for lighter burdens. Very few spend those same years becoming stronger people. And strength has an interesting personality. It refuses to introduce itself until resistance arrives. You don't discover patience on easy days. You discover it while waiting. You don't discover courage when everything feels safe. You discover it the moment fear whispers, turn around, and you decide to keep walking anyway. You don't discover integrity when everyone agrees with you. You discover it when doing the right thing costs you something. Here's what most people don't understand. Character is expensive. That's why it is so valuable. If honesty were free, everyone would have it. If discipline required no sacrifice, everyone would be disciplined. If persistence never became uncomfortable, quitting wouldn't even exist. The value of a principle is measured by the price you're willing to pay to keep it. Let me tell you about a man I once met. He wasn't famous. He wasn't wealthy. He never stood on a stage. He worked before sunrise every single morning repairing old bicycles. For decades, one morning I asked him, "How have you stayed so consistent all these years?" He laughed, not because the question was silly, because the answer had become so natural to him. He said, "Young people think consistency is something you achieve." He wiped grease from his hands. It isn't. It's something you protect. That sentence deserves your attention. You don't build discipline once and keep it forever. You protect it every day from distraction, from comfort, from unnecessary drama, from people who celebrate average, from your own excuses. Imagine you own a beautiful garden. Would you remove weeds once and expect them never to return? Of course not. Every morning you walk through that garden, you pull another weed, you water another plant, you protect what deserves to grow. Your mind is no different. Negativity grows naturally. Excuses spread quickly. Self-doubt never needs permission. Hope, purpose, focus. Those require cultivation. That's why successful people don't simply manage their calendars. They manage their environment. Because environment quietly shapes behavior. Put healthy food in front of you, your choices improve. Surround yourself with people who honor their commitments. Your standards rise. Spend every evening with people who complain about everything. Soon enough, complaining starts sounding normal. Here's something fascinating. Human beings become the average of what they repeatedly experience, not just the people around them, the conversations they entertain, the books they consume, the videos they watch, the thoughts they repeat, the standards they tolerate. Every influence leaves fingerprints. Be careful what you normalize. If laziness becomes normal, effort starts feeling extreme. If excuses become normal, responsibility feels unfair. If discipline becomes normal, excellence begins to feel ordinary. That's the goal, to make extraordinary habits feel ordinary. I remember hearing about an apprentice who desperately wanted to become a master carpenter. Every day, he asked his teacher the same question. When will I finally become great? The teacher never answered. Instead, he handed him another piece of wood, another tool, another lesson. Months became years. The apprentice grew frustrated. One afternoon, he finally exploded. I've worked so hard. Why won't you tell me when I'll become a master? The old teacher picked up 2 chairs. One had been built by the apprentice years earlier. The other had been built the week before. He placed them side by side. Sit. The young man sat in the old chair. It creaked. It wobbled. It complained under his weight. Then he sat in the newer chair, solid, balanced. Strong, the teacher smiled. I never needed to tell you. The wood already knows. That is one of the greatest lessons you'll ever hear. Results reveal what words cannot. You don't have to announce your discipline. People eventually experience it. You don't have to advertise your reliability. Time introduces it. You don't have to convince people you've changed. Consistency becomes the evidence. And this brings us to another excuse people love wearing. They say, I need people to believe in me. Do you? Really? Would it help? Certainly. Is it required? Absolutely not. Some of the greatest transformations happen in complete silence. Before anyone believes in you, you still have work to do. Before anyone applauds, you still have work to do. Before your family understands your vision, you still have work to do waiting. For external validation is another elegant excuse, because if someone else must believe first, then your progress depends on their opinion. Never surrender ownership of your future to somebody else's uncertainty. Think about an airplane. For most of its journey, the passengers do almost nothing. They read, they sleep, they watch movies. But the pilots, they make thousands of tiny corrections. Left a little, right a little, up slightly, adjust again. Most people imagine success as one giant decision. In reality, it's thousands of small corrections. You overspend, you adjust, you lose focus, you adjust, you lose confidence, you adjust, you fail. You learn, you adjust again. The person who refuses to adjust eventually stops moving forward. Flexibility is not weakness, it is wisdom. Trees that refuse to bend often break. Trees that bend wisely survive storms that destroy stronger looking branches. Adjusting your strategy is not the same as abandoning your purpose. People confuse those two all the time. They hit one obstacle and assume the destination was wrong. No, sometimes only the route needs changing. If one door remains closed, build another entrance. If one opportunity disappears, develop another skill. If one conversation fails, improve your communication. Never confuse a temporary obstacle with a permanent identity. Failure says something happened. Identity says something is. Those are completely different conversations. A failed attempt does not make you a failure. A delayed victory does not make your dream impossible. A difficult season does not define your entire life. Seasons change. Winter has never successfully argued spring out of existence. Imagine if farmers behaved the way many people do. They plant seeds in the morning, return in the afternoon, dig everything up because nothing has appeared yet. Ridiculous. Yet people do this with their own goals every day. I exercised for a week. I studied for a month. I started the business. Nothing happened. So they quit. Roots require patience. Growth often begins invisibly. Just because you cannot measure progress today doesn't mean progress isn't happening. Some of the most important changes occur where your eyes cannot see them. Your standards are changing. Your thinking is changing. Your emotional resilience is changing. Your habits are quietly rewriting your future while your present still looks familiar. That is one of the hardest moments to endure when you've changed, but your circumstances haven't caught up yet. Most people quit in that space, not because they're incapable, because they become impatient. Here's what most people don't understand. Success often whispers before it shouts. It arrives disguised as small improvements. You recover from disappointment a little faster. You keep promises a little more consistently. You complain a little less. You listen more carefully. You waste fewer evenings. You make one better decision after another. None of those moments become headlines. But together, they transform a human life. And then one day people look at you and say, "You've changed." No, you changed hundreds of ordinary moments ago. They're only noticing it now. Let me ask you another question. Who are you when nobody is measuring? Because that person is the real architect of your future. Not the version that smiles for photographs, not the version that speaks confidently in public, the version that wakes up alone, the version that decides whether to keep reading one more page, the version that chooses whether to tell the truth when lying would be easier, the version that keeps working after the excitement disappears. That's the person who determines everything. There is an old clockmaker's story I once heard that has never left me. A young apprentice asked why the master inspected every tiny gear with such care when no customer would ever see the inside of the clock. The old man held up one of the smallest gears between his fingers and said, "Because the parts nobody sees decide whether the hands everyone sees tell the truth." Now think about your own life. The invisible habits, the private conversations, the promises no one else even knows you made. Those unseen moments are the gears inside your character. And once you begin to understand that, another excuse begins to lose its power. The excuse that says, no one will know. Maybe no one else will. But every private decision is teaching you who you are becoming. And that lesson becomes impossible to escape. Because the next time you face a difficult choice, you won't simply make that choice. You'll make it according to the person you've been quietly becoming. Think about this for a moment. A sculptor doesn't begin with a masterpiece. He begins with a block of stone. To everyone else, it's just a heavy rock. To the sculptor, it is hidden potential. Every strike of the hammer removes something that doesn't belong. Not because the sculptor hates the stone, because he loves the possibility inside it. Your life is no different. Growth is not always about adding more. Sometimes it is about removing what has been holding you back, removing excuses, removing distractions, removing resentment. removing habits that steal your future 1 hour at a time. Here's what most people don't understand. Every yes costs something. Every no creates something. When you say yes to endless scrolling, you say no to learning. When you say yes to comfort, you often say no to growth. When you say yes to avoiding difficult conversations, you say no to stronger relationships. Life is an exchange. Every decision is a trade. The question is, what are you trading your future for today? I learned something years ago from watching a man sharpen an old axe. I asked him why he spent so much time sharpening instead of cutting wood. He smiled. The dull blade works harder. That stayed with me. How many people are exhausting themselves because they've stopped sharpening their own minds? They wake up tired, rush through the day, come home, drained, repeat. Not because life demands it, but because they never pause long enough to improve themselves, ride, reflect, learn, practice, sharpen. You cannot expect today's thinking to build tomorrow's future. The mind that created your current results must continue growing if it expects different outcomes. That's not criticism, that's opportunity. Because growth is available to anyone willing to become a student again. The moment you believe you know everything, progress quietly leaves the room. The curious keep growing. The arrogant keep repeating. Let me tell you a story. There was a young violinist who desperately wanted to perform in great concert halls. Every day he practiced, yet every evening he left frustrated. I'll never be good enough, he kept saying. His teacher listened for weeks without interruption. Finally, one afternoon she asked him to play the same simple melody he had played on his first lesson years earlier. He played it. This time, it was beautiful, clear, confident, expressive. When he finished, the teacher asked, "Did you hear the difference?" He shrugged. "I only heard the mistakes." She shook her head. "No, you only looked for the mistakes. There is a difference." How many people live exactly like that? They've made real progress. They've become wiser, stronger, more patient, more disciplined. But because they constantly compare themselves to someone further ahead, they completely ignore how